He actually threatened to kill himself this summer.
Working the crowd?
He threatened to throw himself across the Cross Bronx Expressway. And it was a whole wellness thing. We're trying to find him and everything. So he went through this mental health program with us, and I know he already had a therapist and stuff. So, you know, we gave him a replay, and she was like, well, can you speak to Cy? Because he wants him to get criminal record, and he didn't get one.
Mr. Mayor? It's great to see you.
Marcel.
All right. Oh, you need to get them a little closer to you. You're all good. Let's go. The floor is yours.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Wayne Devenish, and I am the founder and chairman of 500 Men Making a Difference, a volunteer men's group of over 1,100 members dedicated to bettering our neighborhoods through community service. I'm also a lifelong New Yorker, born and raised. I lived in Brooklyn and Queens, and now I'm a homeowner in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. Everywhere I've lived in this city has been distinct and has had its own flavor. But one thing has been consistent. Each place felt the weight of unfair and nonsensical marijuana policies. Since Mayor de Blasio took office, that weight has lifted little by little. First, years ago, they stopped arresting for low-level marijuana possession. Then just a few months ago, Mayor de Blasio and the police commissioner announced they'd no longer be arresting people for smoking weed in public without additional cause. These policy changes were huge. They lifted a little bit of the weight overburdening our communities. They helped brighten the future of many young kids and adults, but they couldn't help the past of those already harmed. That's why the mayor is here today to change those things. He's laying out the framework for legalization that begins and ends with us, by recommending expungement of past convictions and by promising to help our communities get a piece of the action once marijuana becomes legal. Today, we're taking a huge step forward. This is what New Yorkers need. They need help starting their businesses, they need guidance on how to move forward, and they need leaders looking for them and making sure they don't get left behind as we legalize things that were previously criminalized. With that, I'd like to both thank and introduce the greatest mayor on earth for the greatest city on earth, Mayor Bill de Blasio.
Thank you. Greatest city on earth, we all agree. Wayne, thank you, and thank you for all you have done to make sure that there is fairness and justice. And I think in the work you've done, you've seen the horrible toll and the price we have paid for injustice. I want to thank you for working with people who needed help coming back from the results of a very unjust system. And that is work we're going to be doing for a long, long time. But I want to say thank God there's been people like you who have done that work when it wasn't easy and made a difference in a lot of people's lives. Let's thank Wayne for all he has done. This is an issue of tremendous importance. We got a lot of people here. I want to thank everyone who is here with us. And I know everyone here cares deeply about this issue, and everyone here can tell you personally about the meaning of these changes. I also want to thank some of the folks who are here. Obviously, some folks up here will be speaking at this press conference, others will not. I want to just acknowledge and thank, first of all, members of my administration who played a very big role in the report that we're publishing today and the recommendations that we are offering, the recommendations that we think are the basis for real change. Dr. Herminia Blasio, our Deputy Mayor. I want to also thank Janelle Doris, my Senior Advisor and Director for the Mayor's Office of MWBEs, and Dom Williams, my Chief Policy Advisor, who really took the lead in this effort from the beginning to look at what was happening all over the country and to figure out what we could learn from it so we could get it right here. So thanks to all of them, and a special thanks to Dom, who I have worked with very, very closely on this. And the elected officials. I want to thank Assemblymember David Weprin, who is the chair of the Corrections Committee in the Assembly, and State Senator Luis Sepulveda. Thank you to both of them for being here and for their support. So this is an important moment because we're talking about a change that must happen, and it must happen the right way. This is the essence of what I feel, and Shirlane and I have been talking about this for a long time, talking about how to get this moment right. And I want to thank Shirlane because as we have talked it through, it's really helped me to think about what fairness and justice looks like in the changes that are needed up ahead. What we do know is the time has come to rewrite the rules, to break the mold of the past, to repair and redeem the lives of people who were treated unjustly. That's what we can do here. And in that spirit, today I announce my support for the legalization of marijuana. But here's what I want to say. We have one chance to get it right. This is unlike so many other things that we have dealt with. We have a chance to get it right here from the beginning because we're at the starting line. And if we just legalize marijuana and don't deal with the underlying issues, we will look back and say what a lost opportunity it was. Because there are issues of justice that must be addressed. And there are issues of opportunity that must be addressed. And legalization done the right way will marry opportunity with justice. That's where we need to go. We have a chance to create a brand new industry that will lift up everyday New Yorkers. And we have a chance to choke off corporate America in the process and not let them get their greedy hands on this industry here in this state. Governor Cuomo has been very clear that legal cannabis is coming in this state. As a result of the obvious changes coming, in July, I formed a task force to chart the best path forward for New York City. To not let just something happen to us via state legislation, but to try and shape what would be a fair and positive outcome for this city. A huge number of city agencies participated, and I want to thank them at the outset. Take a look today at this report, and you'll see how much care, how much energy and intelligence was put into these recommendations and this analysis. It's a very detailed vision of how we get it right. But it's also informed by the times that our society got it wrong, because we all lived through that history. And we do not have to repeat it. We've seen new industries emerge, and we've seen what can happen when they go down the wrong path. So legalization is at a crossroads, really. There's two routes. Either corporate cannabis will take control, or the will of the people will win the day. That is the choice that we have before us. And we know what happens when the corporate sector runs the show. Big tobacco. Big tobacco flourished as an industry after World War II. The corporations knew that cigarettes were deadly, but they kept pushing them anyway, and they pushed them particularly towards kids. It was a systematic effort to deceive. Billions of dollars put behind it. Untold hundreds of thousands of lives lost as a result. Big oil. Big oil is known for decades the harmful effects of climate change. But they tried to systematically build an economy hooked on fossil fuels and to make sure people did not learn what the companies knew about the dangers we faced. And big pharma. Major pharmaceutical companies sold opioids as safe and non-addictive. They created a deadly wave of overdoses in this country. I'm saying this up front because nothing has happened yet in Albany. Not a single vote has been taken. We are present at the creation. We can do something to avert all the disasters we've seen go before, or we can sit back and repeat the same horrible pattern and wonder how many lives will be lost this time. So I say, brothers and sisters, we can't let big pot in the door to begin with. We can't let the corporate sector dominate this debate. And Lord knows they would love to. Instead, we can follow a simple, powerful principle. Doesn't matter what your faith is, this holiday season we celebrate all people, all faiths. But I'll borrow from one faith when I say the principle governing our approach should be the last shall be first and the first shall be last. We have a chance here to ensure that the same kind of companies that caused all those problems don't get the chance this time. And the people who are afflicted by unjust laws have the opportunity for economic progress, have an opportunity for redemption. Those who bore the past burdens should reap the benefits of the future, not corporate executives. Now, let's be clear, and I want to be blunt about this. History is painfully filled with examples of the powerful writing the laws. When you hear people say the economy is rigged, in many ways they're right. The laws, including the tax code, are written to benefit the powerful few. We know that in this case, the laws to date have caused many people to suffer, and often the suffering has been profoundly unequal. Communities of color and low-income people borne the brunt of the so-called war on drugs. So if we know that the laws in the past were written in an unfair and unequal way, we should beware that it doesn't happen again. This administration came here to right these type of wrongs. We already stopped, as you heard, the majority of arrests for smoking marijuana and low-level possession in this city. Now, the state of New York has a chance to write the laws the right way, not for the powerful, but for everyday people, not for the powerful, but those who were so long powerless. Here's an example. In the new law that will be written, let's automatically expunge past convictions for low-level marijuana crimes. Let's give New Yorkers a clean slate and a fair future. Let's slam the door on big marijuana and open the way of opportunity for everyday New Yorkers. The majority of licenses to sell and produce legal weed must go to those whose lives were damaged by illegal weed. And we know exactly how to create a system that reflects that reality. We know where to go geographically. We know that people of color suffered. We know low-income people suffered. We know exactly where to find the people who bore the brunt and give them the majority of the opportunity. Let's use some of the revenue that comes in from legal marijuana, the taxes and the fees. Let's use that to fund healthcare awareness campaigns, youth education, job training, and low-interest loans for the businesses that will be created in the communities that need them. I've said clearly we want New York City to be the fairest big city in America. The legalization of marijuana can help us take a big step in that direction, or done wrong, can set us back once again. It's up to all of us to decide. It's up to all of us to ensure that the people who do the voting in Albany vote in favor of fairness. A few words in Spanish. Estoy anunciando mi apoyo para legalizar el uso de la marihuana. Tomemos este momento para aunar la justicia con la oportunidad. Forjemos una nueva industria que ayude a los neoyorquinos y ponga un alto a la codicia cooperativa. So, as we go forward, we have to be brave about this, everyone. We have to be brave about the fact there'll be very powerful forces trying to bend the law in their direction. Can't back down in the face of that. And now I'm going to turn to someone who, in all my 27 years of knowing her, has never backed down from a fight and has always understood the path to justice. And again, I want to give special thanks to my partner in all things. I've said from day one, the most important advisor in my life happens to also be my wife and happens to be our First Lady. And she said to me early on that if corporate America wins the day here, we would all have done a horrible disservice, and that we have to learn those lessons about big tobacco, big pharma, all the painful lessons that we can't afford to repeat. So I want to thank her for setting that tone so clearly and helping me understand so clearly. Our First Lady, Shirlane McCray.
Who says men don't listen? Thank you so much, Bill, and I want to join you in thanking all the members of this really exceptional task force, which did so much hard work on this report, which lays out a fair, safe, and thoughtful approach to the legalization of marijuana. I believe legalization is the right path for our city and our state, but it is not without risks. As we move forward, we need to answer crucial questions about that go beyond whether to legalize or not. And those questions are not limited to what are the public health consequences and who would profit. But so far, the public conversation we've been having is not nearly as nuanced as it needs to be. And there is far too much at stake here to get it wrong. As Bill pointed out, we have plenty of examples of what wrong looks like. Wrong is more than 100,000 alcohol-related emergency room visits in 1 year in our city. Wrong is state spending on tobacco control and prevention falling short of CDC-recommended levels, even as cigarette smoking remains the country's leading cause of preventable death. Wrong is losing 4 New Yorkers each day to drug overdoses and a nationwide opioid epidemic fueled by corporate greed. Now, marijuana is a different drug than alcohol, tobacco, or opioids, with its own set of safety and health risks, as well as its own medicinal properties. But just like any substance, legal or not, marijuana can be misused. It can lead to dependency, especially in young people who start early. I know from my own experience that it can be habit-forming. We must do everything we can to protect our city's young people and educate all New Yorkers about the safety and health risk involved with marijuana use. With legalization comes the opportunity to do so proactively and strategically. That means keeping corporate drug pushers out of the equation entirely and making room for the people and communities that have suffered the most under the war on drugs, including communities of color. And it means continuing to improve access to behavioral health services in our city, including substance use treatment. Our country has never had a well-funded, integrated behavioral health system, leaving countless people to struggle on their own. Thrive NYC is changing that by taking on the stigma surrounding mental illness and addiction and improving access to mental health care in neighborhoods across the city. But we still have a long way to go. There is no question that Thrive's groundbreaking work will be essential to any smart and safe plan for legalization. We owe that to New Yorkers, especially the younger generation. We owe it to them to address the risks and opportunities of legalization with the careful public health, economic, and civic attention that they deserve. That's why this report is so important. And I urge state lawmakers to use the recommendations as a guide for their work in the months ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shirlane. I mentioned this report that has come out today, and I want to say again to all of the members of the administration who put a lot of time and energy over the last 6 months into this, this is, I think, a very powerful guide to how we need to address the issues facing us when we think about legalization. A lot of work was done to look at what happened in other states, to understand from the grassroots the kind of changes we needed to get it right. And one of the key architects of this report, along with her great team, is the director of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, Liz Glazer.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, First Lady. And hello, everybody. We're so pleased to be releasing these recommendations today that identify what we believe are going to be the goals and challenges that will guide the city's preparation to potential legalization. They're grounded in principles of safety and health, and most importantly, equity. And they're the result, as the mayor has mentioned, of the work of 25 agencies who were brought together last July with deep expertise in public safety and health, in business regulation, taxation, and an array of other fields. And I just wanted to acknowledge Susan Summer, who brought these teams together and worked hard to produce this report. These principles that guided us were first and foremost to address the kinds of disparities that we've experienced in this city. Among the examples that you can read about in this very detailed report are recommendations for the automatic expungement of conviction records with some notice to DAs who may want to object. Second, to protect the health and safety of all New Yorkers, mindful that legalization must be accompanied by strong prevention and education resources for youth and others, and strong regulation of advertising. Smoking in public, we recommend, would still be prohibited, but we would turn to civil, not criminal enforcement. Third, we have to make sure, as the mayor has powerfully stated, that we have the appropriate kind of regulation and promote economic opportunity, that we offer opportunities for small and minority-owned businesses and people with past convictions through an array of mechanisms that we detail in this report, that we have statewide product safety guidelines and pre-sale testing, that we permit localities to make decisions about home delivery or whether to allow home cultivation, and that we launch a community investment fund to dedicate new revenue to neighborhoods that have been harmed by past policies. This report is a reflection of a sea change that's going on around this country and in the city in just the last few years. 10 states have already legalized cannabis, as well as the District of Columbia. On our borders, Canada has legalized, New Jersey's on the cusp, Connecticut is considering, and in our own city, we've worked hard to roll back the disparities that have come with marijuana enforcement. There's growing recognition and impatience with a world that produces such disparate effects in who is touched by our criminal justice system. African Americans and whites use marijuana at the same rates, but in New York City, people of color are 89% of those who are arrested. The work of this mayor, of our police department, of the DAs, and many others has had dramatic effects. From this December to last December, we've seen a 95% reduction in arrests. But it's not enough. And we look forward to working with our fellow New Yorkers in the months ahead as we begin to craft what a smart legalization regime would look like at this moment of creation.
Thank you so much, Liz, and thank you again for your great work and your team's great work on this report. Now I want to introduce one of our key partners in this work of justice and want to commend him. As of this summer, the Manhattan DA's office no longer prosecuted marijuana possession and smoking cases. He's been a leader on this issue. District Attorney of Manhattan, Cy Vance.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for inviting me and our office to this table, and to Ms. McRae, thank you for your leadership, and to Liz Glazer and her team, thank you for the great report that they've issued today. I am very pleased to be able to provide some law enforcement perspective on the issues that you are talking about in your report. And from a law enforcement perspective, I view our job as district attorneys to deliver two things: greater public safety and greater fairness in our communities. And the illegal, treating marijuana as an illegal substance has, in my view, neither provided us with greater public safety, nor certainly has it provided us with greater fairness in our system. In Manhattan, an individual of color is 15 times more likely to have been arrested for marijuana possession than a white similarly situated, and that's simply wrong. This summer, and certainly with the full support and information provided to the mayor, our office completed a 6-month study of our own, focusing on the law enforcement perspective about legalization of marijuana, going to the 10 states and the District of Columbia, talking with district attorneys, talking to those who were in the licensing field to talk about the public safety issues around the country. And I became convinced, and it's reflected in the report that we delivered to the mayor this summer called Marijuana, Public Safety and Fairness, that the experience of states that have legalized marijuana has not demonstrably resulted in any increase in criminal conduct. There are, as the First Lady said, there are issues that we're going to need to adjust to until we figure out the banking and the other ways to fund and to finance these industries. It's a cash business, and cash businesses are subject, more likely to be robbed than non-cash businesses. So when I say there has not been any demonstrable effect, I think with thoughtful planning and obviously the mayor's leadership, we can overcome what may be some very near-term issues, but that are not going to ultimately provide long-term difficulties for our communities. So I think it's time, as the mayor had said, to legalize marijuana. It's time to provide a rational licensing system, and we can certainly learn a lot from states who've legalized it on what to do and what not to do. Many states legalize marijuana through citizens' initiatives, through public referenda. And those are very powerful, but they did not provide those states, including California, with the time to develop the licensing structure, the economics framework that needs to be instituted for this marijuana legalization to be as successful as it can be. But I believe with the mayor's leadership, the governor's leadership, and the leadership of our communities and all of New Yorkers, legalization of marijuana will create a more fair system. I agree with the mayor that there has to be some consequence for those who smoke marijuana in places that, at ages that are not old enough and in places that the community doesn't want it, but it shouldn't be a crime. It just simply shouldn't be a crime. And so I think it will make our court system significantly more fair. So district attorneys in Philadelphia, in Brooklyn, St. Louis, and now in Manhattan have all changed their policies on prosecution of marijuana cases. This is a step forward. And with expungement, I think we need to look back and make sure that those who have been prosecuted for minor possessions of marijuana have those cases dismissed. And when that happens, and until that happens, I don't think we really will have delivered on our promise of fairness and reform in this area. So, Mr. Mayor, Shirlane, thank you so much.
Thank you, District Attorney. Throughout this week, I should just note, the whole administration is focusing on the borough of Manhattan, doing a whole variety of things to address issues in communities across Manhattan. This obviously is an issue that deeply affects this borough and all 5 boroughs. And I want to say the borough president, who's been working with us closely on this for years, fought against arrests for small amounts of marijuana. So I know this is an important day for her as well. Borough President Gail Brewer.
I like mom and pop stores too. So, thank you very much to everyone. So I read recently that the U.S. Navy Admiral Grace Hopper, the inventor of COBOL programming language, is credited with saying that the most dangerous words in the English language are, "We've always done it this way."
That's right.
That right there is the truth. So for decades, for the better part of a century really, government has pursued the war on drugs, ramping up penalties, arresting people and incarcerating them for years just for possession. And where has it gotten us? Just as the wonderful district attorney of Manhattan stated. The number of people arrested for a marijuana law in 2017 in the United States, over 650,000 people. The number of people who were charged with marijuana law violations who were arrested for possession only 90.8%. And for this, people are spending years in jail, having their lives ruined, as we know, and taxpayers are paying billions. And we all know that there has been a huge racial disparity in enforcement. That's why we have been pursuing decriminalization policies here in New York, but it's time we do more, and I thank the mayor for that. Prohibition on marijuana has failed, and it's time for us to move on. Yes, there are very real public health concerns which will be addressed. There need to be regulations and restrictions, as you have outlined. Yes, we need to correct the injustices that are happening in our criminal justice system. Yes, community boards. You know I love community boards. Yes, community boards and local government need to have a say in when and where marijuana retail and consumption will be allowed, just like alcohol. There's a lot of homework to do. But decriminalization isn't enough anymore, and it's time for New York to lead, to stop thinking about what we've always done. We need to think about what we do next. So I'd like to thank all the amazing activists who have been working tirelessly on this issue and who, frankly, a lot of us should have listened to sooner. I'd like to thank the mayor and his entire administration for moving the conversation forward, and the district attorneys. And I'd like to thank my colleague, I know she's not here, Senator Liz Kruger, whom I love, and the colleague, Assemblyman Crystal Peoples-Stokes from Buffalo, for introducing the marijuana legislation and taxation 4 or 5 years ago, and now we're moving this conversation forward. Thank you very much. Let's get to work.
Thank you, Borough President. And I want to echo the point about the many advocates and activists who are here, and I hope are listening. If they're not here, that your work was not in vain, to say the least. A lot has moved because so many people helped to sound the alarm and show that there was a different way. And I want to thank everyone who's been part of that work and implore you all to use everything you've got in Albany in the coming months so we can get this right. I want to now take a little sojourn out of Manhattan and turn to the District Attorney of the Bronx. She has been a leader in reducing unnecessary prosecutions and supporting decriminalization. Bronx DA Darcel Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, First Lady McCray, Liz Glazer, my partner in all things criminal justice these days, and my colleague Cy Vance. Thank you so much for being here on this important issue. Mr. Mayor, I commend you and your task force for its thorough and thoughtful report, which looks at the equity, health, education, and most importantly, the public safety and quality of life aspects of legalization of marijuana. The recommendations recognize the importance of having safeguards in place. The recommendations also dovetail what my office has been doing for the past 3 years in terms of dismissing low-level quality of life offenses that have an impact on employment, immigration, housing, and education opportunities. We dismissed 160,000 warrants for quality of life crimes last year, including marijuana, and will continue to do so. We also advocated for the non-criminal arrest of marijuana possession as well as smoking, and have declined to prosecute many cases. I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, that the time is right. I agree that the time has now come for the state legislature to decriminalize marijuana, providing a uniform approach to vacating and expunging past marijuana convictions to ensure fairness for residents of the Bronx and throughout New York State. Residents in communities of color, like the Bronx, have been disproportionately affected by these marijuana arrests and ultimately the prosecutions. This is not right and it's not fair. And I work each and every day now to hope to change this. So as legalization is approaching a reality in our state, the mayor's task force recommendations are a great foundation for moving forward. So on behalf of the people of the Bronx, I thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Finally, I want you to hear from two of the representatives of the community we're in right here. First of all, someone who has really spent a lifetime fighting for social justice, Councilmember Adonis Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And before I refer to this issue, I would like to I acknowledge that today the great Dominican communities and the Latino community lost a great champion, Ramon Murphy, who was the president of the Dominican Bodega Association, a great leader in our community. So 2 hours away, he passed away, and it's a big loss for all of us. So I wanted to send my prayer to him and to his family. Guys, United States of America is the country that consumes most drugs in the whole world. And that's why today I would like to dedicate my word on support what the mayor is trying to accomplish here to 2 great leaders in Latin America, former President Mujica from Uruguay, and the great writer Gabriel Garcia Marquez, that since the 80s been addressing the issue of why we need to legalize marijuana. So as someone that shares my Latino origin, it's a proud day to know that leaders here are standing recognizing. It's not that this is the time to legalize marijuana. It's that marijuana has been practically legal for the upper class. When was the last time that someone who is sitting here didn't get some time together and have a social life and was able to get marijuana? When was the last time that one of those 65 million tourists that went to the nightclub here was prosecuted because they was coming out for using marijuana? Unless you're Black and Latino and poor, you will never understand the importance of this day today. I appreciate the compassion, but marijuana has been illegal for Black, Latino, and poor, a nation. It's part of the life of our culture. That's why former presidents and mayors and whoever, it's fine today for them to say, to write in the book, in the bio, yes, I use it many times, it's part of my life. Today, we're recognizing how we fail to Black and Latino. This is about racism. This is about discrimination. This is about understanding that we have to take our city and the society to a better place where everyone should be treated equal. So that's why for me, as someone, 13 brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews, former students being deported because they started selling some weed there, who lived a year of Mayor Bloomberg, Mayor Giuliani, where they closed block. And they didn't allow people to walk through their own apartment and prosecute it because they were buying few bottle weed, and the rest of the people going to Long Island, going to all those parties to the rooftop, and part of their life. So, Mr. Mayor, this is a big day for all of us, but especially to those millions of Black and Latino who were criminalized in the 80s, and the 70s, and the 90s. This is about the documentary, the 13 Amendments, putting some tool to send Black people and Latino to jail. So, thank you for your compassion to everyone who never lived that experience, who never saw some of you family members to be sent off state, to be sent to Rikers Island, because they were doing the same thing that other upper class and middle class were doing here. So hoy para mí es reconocer el liderazgo de un alcalde que está diciendo, nosotros le fallamos. And I hope that as we move on at the state and the city level, let's look at this issue as a pre-entry. Can we work to give forgiveness to all those millions of people that they have a criminal record from the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s because marijuana was not legal? I hope that we can work on that issue too. Yo quiero que nosotros trabajemos para darle un perdón a aquellos jóvenes afroamericanos y latinos que lo criminalizamos. And I want to end with this. The question is where the money is going to be invested. I share the same call. Black and Latino should be the one leading this industry. Right. They have been the victim. And to show compassion, let's put the money where the mouth is.
Amen.
Let's work.
Thank you.
So, and with that, this business should be controlled by Black and Latino starting, and second, this money should be reinvested in the poor community to fight opium and other drug addiction. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Council Member. Very powerful comments. And now one more speaker, and he is almost in his new office. And when he gets to his new office, we're going to hear his voice loud and clear as well on issues of justice, particularly for our young people. State Senator-elect Robert Jackson.
Well, Mayor, let me just say, let me thank the task force for putting this report together. And obviously, I'm not there yet, but I'm sitting next to the senator that will be chairing the Corrections Committee, and also Jamal Bailey from the Bronx will be chairing the Codes Committee. And obviously, this is an important issue not only for New York City, but for the rest of the state. And so I'm glad that you have a partner that is your #1 advisor, because quite frankly, as she said, some men do listen. But I have to say that knowing that the issues and concerns that impact our communities in New York City, and especially communities of color and the impact, and I'm so happy that the DA from the Brooklyn and Bronx and Manhattan and all the other DAs are coming together and say, we have to do the right thing where people that have been arrested for low-level marijuana use and possession, they need to be expunged and give them the second opportunity to do whatever they need to do, especially for our jobs that are very critical as far as supporting their families. But, so I'm very pleased today as the state senator-elect representing the 31st Senatorial District, which includes all of Washington Heights and Inwood and goes all the way down to the Chelsea area. And as you know how many people that is, that's millions of people. New York's Manhattan, as Gail knows, has 1.8 million New Yorkers. So we're not only doing it for the people in Manhattan, but the entire city and entire state. And so, quite frankly, I'm going to be turning to my senator right here to my left, to my right, and then Jamal Bailey to my left, and also to make sure that we do the right thing on behalf of all New Yorkers, and understanding that we will take this and consider that with everything else we have, and we're going to make it work. That's our commitment to you. And thank you both.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to take questions from the media. Questions from the media on this report and on the marijuana issue. We'll then do a brief break and come back with comments on another issue and open field questioning on other topics. But first on this issue. Go ahead, Dave.
Mayor, not to sound like a Debbie Downer on this, but as this has proceeded along over the last year, I mean, I don't think any New Yorker can walk on a street anywhere and not just be knocked over by the stink of marijuana. I mean, it's everywhere we go. Are you in any way going to address the fact that...
Hold on. We don't need people leaving yet. Let's stay through the Q&A here. Hey, team, we got a little bit ahead of ourselves.
We're going to go to work.
Stay where you are. Everyone stay where you are, unless they have to go to work. If they have to go to work, go on. But everyone else, hang out till we get through this.
They're going to work.
Okay, work is good. Anyone who has to go to work, go to work. I'll start, and if anyone else wants to weigh in, you're welcome. Dave, first of all, I respectfully disagree with the way you're characterizing life in New York City right now. I walk around New York City a whole lot, and I am not knocked over by the smell of marijuana. I'm sorry. Life continues here in our city. I am telling you, it's just not an objective statement.
New scent of Manhattan.
Again, God bless the Times. Guess what? They're not always accurate either. So I walk around Manhattan a lot. I walk around the outer boroughs a lot, and I do not believe that's accurate. I do believe that a lot of people smoke marijuana in public. And as is clear here, we still believe that is wrong. We believe that the legalization should still prohibit smoking in public, because for a lot of people, that's a very uncomfortable situation. For a lot of parents, that's very uncomfortable in terms of their children and how they want to teach their children. So there still need to be sanctions for smoking in public. That's very clear in the recommendations of this report. Those sanctions should not include arrest unless there are extenuating seriousness, like other serious crimes happening simultaneously. But I believe this is the right balance to make clear that overall we need legalization with a whole host of measures in place to ensure fairness, but with clear sanctions against public smoking. Please.
Under the plan, will smoking marijuana in public still form the basis for a Terry stop by the NYPD? Maybe the DAs can address this.
Liz or DAs want to speak to that?
So a Terry stop is really just if you have reasonable suspicion.
Put your mic on.
Yeah. Take it on. Is it on? On is good.
A Terry stop is, the basis of it is that you have reasonable suspicion about somebody. So it's not specifically tied to marijuana.
So if someone's smoking pot in public, it would not be allowed under the plan. Would the police be able to stop that person, question him, ask for ID, inquire further about other suspected misbehavior or crimes?
So I think it's very, very fact specific. I would defer to my friends in the DA's office, but it's very, very fact specific.
It is fact specific, but if, as the mayor hopes, and I think others hope, marijuana is legalized, then it would no longer necessarily be the position that the police would be seeing criminal conduct occurring in front of them.
Who would issue a civil ticket then?
Police would.
So while they're issuing that civil ticket, would they be able to inquire, stop the person?
I think the police are able to take reasonable steps to enforce the law, but if marijuana is legalized, that would not include arrest. But I would say this, Mr. Mayor, if I can.
Please.
New York today is the largest black market for marijuana in the country. I mean, we have to realize that's what we are now. And as we see the dangers of fentanyl and other powerful substance being mixed into drugs and affecting members of our community, I think we are far safer to have a regulated marijuana industry, which only sells marijuana that is safe and has reasonable rules around age and around locations where it can be used. That's a step forward. We're kidding ourselves if we think that we're not using pot in New York at a huge volume, because we are. So let's get it done right.
Amen. Wait, let's get some others in. You'll get a chance to come back. Go ahead.
In terms of licenses, do you have an idea about how many you would like to see citywide? And what about, do you want to break it down by neighborhoods? And how could neighborhoods say they want more or fewer?
So I'll start from sort of the common sense point of view, from my point of view, and then let experts jump in who are part of the task force. To me, the building blocks here are to keep corporate America out, so to not create a licensing situation that opens the door for those who have the most money and power to grab up a lot of licenses. And again, that's unusual. That's breaking the mold. Typically, when anything happens in this country, corporate America is well positioned to dominate. We have a chance to rewrite the rules. We're starting from scratch. We have all the power of state government. Let's exclude corporate America from this equation, period. Can be done. And then second, we know where the harm was. We know where people were hurt. Let's focus the economic opportunity where people were hurt. We know exactly which neighborhoods, exactly what kind of people, especially folks who are incarcerated for the most minor offense, people lost years of their life. They should have special economic opportunity. That's something we can give back to those who lost so much. So to me, that's what you do. You build a licensing structure that focuses on where the licenses can do the most good. Anyone want to add? Okay.
Any kind of numbers in mind, though? They're going to be 10 in the neighborhood, 50 in the neighborhood, 5 in the neighborhood?
Obviously, it's going to be a legislative process, but does anyone want to speak to, I mean, I don't think I have a number in mind because it's something we have to work through, but what I'm concerned that it not be an open-ended thing where any kind of company can do anything they want, but I don't think we have a numerical vision yet.
That's exactly right.
Okay, go ahead.
This is a two-part question. Going off of how common the use of marijuana is currently in the city and has been for decades, I'm curious for the whole panel, if you've ever smoked marijuana, could you raise your hand?
There you go.
And I actually inhaled, by the way.
That's right. Senator, you are profile encouraging.
Mayor, now, you've been speaking for years, I believe, about your opposition to this, specifically because of corporate America or concern over children starting to use too young. So what changed your mind? Where was the change of heart?
Yeah, and I've been very public about the fact that, I can't even remember whether I inhaled because it was so long ago, but but I tried marijuana in college. It wasn't my thing. I haven't used it since. But I think the bigger issues are were we going to create something that actually was going to be fair? Were we going to create something that addressed the problems, or just open the floodgates? And I'll use the example with the opioid manufacturers. That's very recent. They got to create something very dangerous with very little in place to stop them. Then they got to promote it. And even when they knew it was addictive, they got to lie about it. And now we have an opioid crisis of epic proportions. That happened in all of our lifetimes recently. And there was nothing in place to stop that. And my view is, here's a situation where we could actually write rules first. So one of the things I hesitated about was trying to understand, could we actually get the rules done first before the legalization occurred? Could we actually put things in their proper order? And the more research my team did, the more I came to believe there really was a way to set ground rules that could work, that could focus on safety and health and fairness. And I think the other part of the equation was to understand what happened every place else. Because honestly, we're not only the biggest city in America, but we're the most complex place in America. And before I felt comfortable saying we should legalize, I needed to know what happened in the other big cities around the country that went through it. As you heard, the research came back very consistent. And Dom and Liz and others have looked at it, and we've had this conversation now over months. They really looked carefully, sent people out to those cities, talked to public safety officials. The consistent response was it did not negatively affect the safety dynamic. There were health issues that needed to be addressed, particularly through education, but that could be done. And that gave me the confidence to say that we could do this here. But I will emphasize, there should not be a single final step until the rules are in place and until we know how to do this fairly. If we just open the floodgates, we're going to regret it. Go back there.
What resources do you see being made available to smaller players and independents? Because I think the reason so many corporations have thrived in this space already is because the tax environment, the regulatory environment necessarily so are very complex, and that just, smells like corporate, something they'd be better at. So
correct.
What resources do you see putting in place to make this vision happen?
That's a great question. I'll start, and Liz or Janelle, anyone who wants to jump in, Dom, anybody who wants to speak to this. The first thing I'd say is you're right on the money there. When you create an opportunity and you say, anyone has a chance here, come on down, but you have to have a few $1 million in your pocket to begin, you have to have a battery of lawyers, immediately you exclude folks who have suffered. It becomes a total catch-22. We need to, I mentioned what we've already thought of. We think that the city's going to have to step in with direct support for the new businesses like loans and helping them go through licensing and things like that. I think laws can be written to make it simpler to participate versus harder. I think there has to be a very conscious effort to do it. So that gets back to my central point. Everyone in Albany should make sure they get it right. So they're writing a law that allows a repeat of everything that happened before. Don't pass that law. Stop. Actually think about how are you going to empower the communities that have suffered. And if that means lowering the bar to entry and breaking that pattern you described, and that's what we need to do. Any of my colleagues want to speak?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. We have a concept.
Just introduce yourself for everyone.
John L. Doris, the Senior Advisor and Director of the Mayor's Office of Minority-Owned Business Services. We joined with our colleagues on the task force to really look at the equity applicants in other states and the programs that they had. And we made sure that in our recommendation, we did put forth that first and foremost, we need some financial assistance to these particular businesses. And secondarily, business services to help build their capacity and also deal with this new regulatory environment. It's going to be difficult for anyone to come into this environment as a small business and survive without the assistance of the city and all of our resources that we have. So we did talk also about the fee structure, making sure that it is doesn't exclude or prohibit these businesses from participating, and a series of other resources that we want to make available to these businesses. So certainly, Mr. Mayor, we have contemplated that, and it's in the report for the equity applicants.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Please,
also.
please.
At the state level, we have been discussing legalization for some time now, and I can tell you that I don't believe that there's going to be any legalization unless there's a component for NWBEs to benefit from this.
Amen.
I think the big companies like MedMen and so forth understand that this is a major problem. They've offered to create some sort of banking system where they each contribute about $1 million, $10 to $11 million, to finance in minority communities, provide funding so that they can start this business. And I know they recognize that that's a problem. Now, the $11 million for this project is pittance. Yeah. But the reality is that we at the state level, and I believe my colleague, Assemblyman Weapon, can speak to that also, but we at the state level would not allow this to become legalized unless our communities benefit, because we've suffered the most from marijuana convictions.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Go ahead.
On the issues of safety and health, District Attorney Vance was mentioning safer marijuana that's not mixed with other drugs or potentially harmful substances. There's still so much unknown about the health benefits or health risks of marijuana. What questions or concerns do you have? Obviously, it's still illegal under federal law, so there hasn't been very much study. But what are some of the questions that you'd like to see answered about health benefits or risks?
I'll start, and then if any of my colleagues, DAs or Dr. Blasio, anyone wants to jump in. Look, again, this is something Shirley and I talked about a lot. And we, as parents, we thought from the perspective of parents who are really concerned about their young people and the exposure to any substance, including a substance that might not be what they think it is. But it's all against the backdrop of this massive black market we have right now and the widespread usage we have right now. So I think this may be under the category of it's better to light a single candle than to curse the darkness, like better to engage and try to get a working legal structure that addresses real health and safety issues, real public education campaign to go with it. Because I actually believe the moment of legalization allows for a fuller discussion. You could do a public education campaign right now, and I think a lot of people might blow it off, but if you have a real honest conversation in this city and this state about the health issues and the things that people need to think more clearly about, it could have a real deep impact. So that's something that we want to do. But also, I think your question gets to a law enforcement piece about everything we need to do to go after folks who might be lacing marijuana with even more dangerous additives, and we take that very, very seriously, and that, of course, would remain illegal and something we could go at. So DAs, Liz, Erminia, go ahead.
I think one of the challenges that has to be addressed with legalization of marijuana is developing the science to determine when someone is intoxicated by marijuana.
Right.
That exists for alcohol at a very sophisticated and accepted level. It doesn't exist for marijuana. So the science needs to improve. People should, if you're driving intoxicated by alcohol, you're going to get stopped and arrested. If you're driving intoxicated by marijuana, you should be stopped as well. But we don't have the science yet. That needs to be developed, and that there should be a full push nationwide as this legalization movement grows to answer the question, what does it take for someone who is 6 foot tall, 180 pounds, to be intoxicated by marijuana?
And I think also with the legalization, we will know at least what is being put out there. Right now, we don't because it's illegal. So just like we're dealing with the opioid crisis, we have it being fentanyl being laced in the heroin, in cocaine now, and other different things. As a matter of fact, counterfeit pills are being made that looks like an opioid pill that you could get by prescription, but it's full fentanyl. So with the regulation, we will at least know what is being sold, and at the same time continue on the law enforcement side to deal with those people who continue to exercise their right to sell in the black market.
Down this way?
Yeah, see, so I did want to add and echo something that the mayor, I think, stipulated very eloquently. So around health effects, we clearly want to understand and do prevention around youth just as we want to do it around alcohol and other substances, just because we know that the earlier people start to use substances, the more at risk they are. But I wanted to say something that we haven't captured yet, which is that unnecessary incarceration has public health consequences, right? So we're not having this discussion in a vacuum, right? When you are taking people who ought not be in jail, whole communities who ought not be in jail, that is impacting individuals, that is impacting families, that is having consequences around their missed days of work, consequences around their ability to get work, consequences about their ability to continue their education. These are public health issues.
That's right.
Thank you. Okay. Who hasn't gone yet? Jill. No. No.
Just kind of on that subject, these are businesses, as was alluded to by the NDA earlier, with large amounts of cash and large amounts of marijuana. And what's the plan to keep that safe?
Excellent question. I'll just turn to Liz or Dom, both of whom looked a lot at the question of the experience of other states. And again, what was crucial here was, did legalization affect public safety in a meaningful way? And that question was asked of law enforcement officials, for example, in Colorado and Washington. Those are two states we really focused on because of the presence of Denver and Seattle. They're not quite New York City, but they're still big cities, and there was some comparability. And what we kept getting back was, no, there's not been a negative impact. But you're right, it means there's still law enforcement considerations and changes of approach that might be necessary. So anyone want to speak to that?
Cash is concerning, obviously, and that's why we want to be able to regulate. If you go to any of these states, you'll see stores that have cameras, you'll see security. All of these states went through the experience of starting to regulate and then seeing that they needed to have stronger regulations around security. We want to be able to do that up front, and that's why we need to have the ability to build out a structure of what a store needs to look like, what a facility needs to look like, and deal with the cash and large amount of product sort of ramifications.
Otherwise, who's not, let me see who hasn't gone yet. Yoav, I really admire, I'm not high. I'm looking at what you're wearing and I feel like I'm high. Surely there must be some explanation.
Party, actually.
Oh, good, okay, okay.
I wanted to ask you, a lot of your progressive allies arrived to this point, years ago. I'm thinking about Melissa Mark Viverito, and they shared a lot of the same concerns as you did, but they didn't see them as insurmountable. And in fact, today's report shows that they're not insurmountable. And I'm just curious whether there's a personal element to your stance against legalization that might have been keeping you from arriving at this point sooner.
I think it's very different when you're the chief executive officer of the city and when you're responsible for the public safety and the health of 8.6 million people. I'm not taking away from anybody who came to the conclusion sooner. I respect them all, but I think the considerations here required a lot of careful examination. And I can tell you a whole lot of people on this team put a whole lot of time into trying to understand these issues and what the experience of other places have been and how to get it right. And it took a lot of time to discern what would be solutions to some of the mistakes elsewhere. For example, in a lot of the other jurisdictions, there were nowhere near the kinds of guarantees that people who suffered from the war on drugs would benefit economically. In most places, corporate America, the door was open wide to them. There was no restrictions put in place. A lot of places did not expunge records automatically. So when we look at the experience around the country, there's a lot to learn, including what should have happened that didn't. And also, to me, it was very different to talk about this 4 or 5 years ago before we had the experiences of Washington State and Colorado over a serious period of time to learn from. And I think we're just a more complex, more difficult place than any place else. I mean, this is the ultimate, right? We're the greatest city in the world, and we're the most complex city in the world, the most diverse city in the world. What we need to succeed might be different than other places, but at least we wanted to have the advantage of seeing real-life experience over a period of time in some other big cities. So all of those factors for me, went into making sure we get it right and taking the time to do so. Who hasn't gone yet? Get a chance? Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, what happens to people who are already on parole or probation for marijuana violations and the law? And then secondly, I know you just talked about the personal, but I mean, you've been explicit in talking about your father's addiction, and your wife has talked about her issues smoking marijuana to your children. Can you talk a little bit more about those direct personal issues and how they related to your decision to support legalization?
Yeah, I know marijuana is different than other drugs, clearly, and that's important to this discussion. But yeah, if you've seen addiction up close and personal, and not only was my father addicted to alcohol, he was addicted to cigarettes too, and lost his life because of it. That's what sent him into a spiral. And it was very, very painful, and it went on for years and years and years. It was kind of the dominant reality of a lot of my childhood. If you see someone suffer like that, and I remind you, this is a guy who fought for the United States in World War II in some of the toughest battles of that war and came back alive, missing half a leg. That was horrible enough, and the trauma he went through, but then all that left him vulnerable to another tragedy. And, you know, for all of us in my family watching that, it was extraordinarily painful. And you can't take addiction lightly when you've seen it. You know, you just can't. So, yeah, that's something I think about all the time, you know, that anything we do, we better be damn certain we're not accidentally opening up a dynamic where more people will suffer. But again, marijuana is different. I can separate in my mind the difference, but what Shirlane said is powerful. You know, of all the things we're talking about here, alcohol is the least regulated, but possibly the most destructive. You know, so it's a great question because it really gets, you know, to the heart of the matter. Because I saw someone victimized by the tobacco industry, I can tell you over my dead body, will big corporate marijuana do that to New Yorkers? But I also can say to you, people being victimized every day by the alcohol industry, and there's next to nothing being done at the federal level to stop that. Maybe in this moment we can start to wake people up to the fact that any drug can cause dependency, and that people need to understand how to approach any kind of drug with care, and that some people are more prone to addiction. I mean, this is something Shirlane has talked about. It totally connects with Thrive. Like, we've got to educate people. We've got to let people have a place to turn to if they're having a problem. And we can do that while legalizing properly. But if we let the corporate sector in the door, this is going to be, you know, billion-dollar pushers convincing more and more people to use a drug, then we're going on the road to hell. Yeah.
Next question about parole.
Hold on. I'm sorry. He has two questions, and I got involved. Erica, I hear you. I hear you, Erica. He has two questions, and I focused on the second, forgot the first. On the parole question, Liz, DAs, who want to speak to, obviously the intention is exactly the same. We want to see people not be victimized by broken laws of the past. So how do we want to go about that, Liz?
So the issue here is, what will parole and probation do when somebody who's under their supervision tests positive, right? Because virtually no one is on parole or probation for a marijuana offense. I think that parole and probation have already begun to look at this, and it's not an automatic cause for having your parole or probation revoked. But I think there's a long road to go, and I think both agencies, both at the state, that's parole, and in the city, probation, recognize that.
You guys want to add?
One thing we can do is we can make the technical violation of having marijuana in your system a sanction only by some very limited sanction by parole or probation. Not that it would violate you if you're on parole to go back to state prison for a long period of time, but there would be graduated sanctions which would be very limited in time, and that's a near-term way to focus differently on technical violations around possession or use of marijuana.
I agree with Cy on that. As a former judge, I know I could, tell you how many times that people came before me on an application of violation of their probation for the reuse of marijuana. So they're limited, but it does happen. So it's something that we do have to look at to make sure that it's fair, even if it is going to remain, that it's not something that they, spend inordinate amount of time going back to prison just because they have an addiction or whatever. Also, when they changed the Rockefeller laws, there were ways to deal with that as well, that people who were convicted under the Rockefeller laws were able to make applications before the courts to have their sentences reduced and different things of that nature. And that might be a way of dealing with parole and probation to deal with how violations by use of marijuana will work.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm wondering if you can be as specific as possible about.
Louder.
I'm wondering if you can be as specific as possible about where revenues would go, and also what tax rates are being considered at state and local levels.
Again, we're not the legislators. We believe that revenue needs to go to the kinds of things I talked about: education campaigns, specific efforts that would foster economic opportunity in communities that have suffered. There's other things that could benefit from revenue, but those are examples. But as to being very specific, we're going to engage the legislative process now. This was our framework of what we think the legislature needs to account for. But now we're going to get under the hood with them and figure out a lot of the specifics. Hold on, I just want to make sure everybody, media seems to be on this side. We're doing media questions. So if there's any media on that side, let me know. Okay, go ahead.
Two-part question. You mentioned.
Just do the first one I want to ask. We got a lot going on. Just do the first one, and then I'll give you a chance to do the second right after, but just do one at a time for clarity.
What about people in federal housing or federal subsidized housing, such as Section 8, who are being penalized for using medical marijuana? How will we bake their safety into this program so they don't get evicted from their housing for using their medicine?
So I'll start, and Liz or Dom can jump in. The federal law is very clear in the case of the Housing Authority. I assume it's the same for Section 8. Is that your understanding? That, and we can't do away with the federal law. What we can do is have specific locations where it's appropriate as a way to give people an alternative where they can live under the laws of New York State and New York City, but not be put in an untenable situation. If you're in a federally backed housing situation, unfortunately, the federal law is the ultimate determinant there. Anyone want to add to that?
Housing?
Say again?
Would you relocate people?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying the folks there, they should not relocate. We're not in a position to relocate them. There's 400,000 people in the Housing Authority. It's not to take the people out of the housing, it's to take the weed out of the housing and have another place where you can smoke it in an appropriate fashion. You want to talk to that?
And just to say, this is really something that every state except one that's legalized has done, to have places where people can go and smoke who can't, for whatever reason, smoke in their own. Yeah.
Okay, what, did you have a second question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, my second question is to the gentleman third from left on the panel. I'm sorry because there are no nameplates. He mentioned something about MedMen. MedMen are actually working behind the scenes to try to get the license. They're lobbying to get the licenses to be $1 million. So that kind of flies in the face of them, making a small donation to helping people get equity for licenses.
They're lobbying. Absolutely.
That's Senator Luis Sepulveda. Go ahead.
They are lobbying. They've made it a full court press. They're attempting to do it, but there is, within the legislators that represent communities of color, we've made it clear to them that, with the integration, vertical, horizontal integration, we want to make sure that they don't gobble up everything. And so, there's.
Okay. We're not doing it back and forth. Come on. You asked your question. Let them finish. Do you have anything more to say? Okay. Go ahead.
Mayor, how do you expect the legalization of marijuana to play into the hiring process, both for the city and city workers, who may be drug tested, and also for private employers? Do you expect to offer any guidance to them to, maybe change the way they drug test.
I think it'll lead to a series of changes, and we certainly think there should be major changes. Liz, Dom, someone want to go over some of the specifics on employment?
You want to do it? You want me to?
Someone go.
Yeah. So, so again, we have learned a lot from the experience of other states who have done this. And just in sort of broad strokes, the notion here would be, that we would prohibit pre-employment and random drug, not we, but the legislation would prohibit pre-employment and random testing. There would, of course, be exceptions for certain kinds of employment where there are federal strictures about that, or certain kinds of other sensitive jobs. And again, we have sort of a path to follow that's been tested in a number of other states.
I'm not aware of this, but does the city routinely do pre-employment drug testing for employees other than like police? I know police are obviously subject to
What's the current standard? Anyone know exactly?
Yeah.
There are some places where there is testing, but it's not like a uniform.
Right, I bet basically health and safety
Around
agencies,
different
right?
sorts of health and safety.
We can, let's have the team follow up and give you the specifics on that. Yes?
Mr. Mayor, you talk about putting safety for the youth, especially with permanent messages in schools, but in this community in Washington Heights, there's a lot of fear from parents. As you know, there's a big hookah consumption here. Everybody, no matter where you go, there's hookah being sold, and some of them have told us, can the marijuana be put on the hookah and then become more attractive to you? Because the whole thing is a very attractive process. You go to any restaurant at night or a bar, and it's there. And couples are doing it, and young people
No,
are
I hear
doing
you.
it.
And look, we've taken some steps with the council on regulation of the hookah bars. And I would remind people this is going to be a living, breathing situation. If we see new problems emerge, we're going to go address them and regulate further. I would say, to take to sort of the essence of your question, how it relates to this, that's a real issue. It's not a reason not to legalize. It is a reason to figure out how to make sure that that doesn't become a new problem. Underage usage is going to be illegal, period. So I would say, honestly, from an enforcement point of view, if a bunch of underage kids went to a hookah bar to use marijuana, that would be a pretty straightforward violation, and that bar would be in a lot of trouble for allowing underage consumption. And that's a matter of enforcement by NYPD, by Consumer Affairs, and other agencies. Is that what you would say? Anything to add?
Very much so. I mean, I think the issue is very much as the mayor has said and as DA Vance has said, we're living with these issues right now, and how do we actually make it fairer and safer? One of the ways we do it is by regulation, and again, we have a lot of experience now to learn from other states.
I want to add that education plays a huge role in all of this to help young people and their families, not adults in a young person's life, understand substance use and the dangers, and making sure that young people are in an environment where there's not that kind of peer pressure or risk-taking that can lead to bad habits. We haven't done that before.
Amen.
Dick Godfrey said he wouldn't welcome the city or any other community being more restrictive than what the state may allow. Obviously, the state doesn't have a plan yet, but I wanted to know how it would play out if the state grants the city authority to exercise local control.
So I have a lot of respect for the Assembly member. I would just make a broader point here. Obviously, we want to see in the state legislation a host of core issues addressed, particularly the equity questions, the kinds of things that if the state legislation isn't right, we can't save the day at the local level. If the state legislation lets the corporate sector in on a vast level, in my opinion, we're all screwed at that point. But what I think is fair is to say, create the basic ground rules on a state level, and then give localities the ability to figure out a lot of the specifics. If you talk about the way you would regulate, the question earlier about the Section 8 housing and public housing, that's a major, major issue here that we're going to need to have the ability to come up with creative solutions our own way. That's not going to be true in a number of other parts of the state. So there can't be a one-size-fits-all. We have a whole host of public safety issues that will be different here in the biggest city in America than they would be in a smaller city or a rural area. So I think a basic state framework that then allows for a substantial amount of local discretion and local control is the smart way to go.
That the state plans to be more conservative and then having the city kind of take on a more progressive framework?
Look, I wouldn't be surprised by that, but I would say, and I think that's been true in some other places. I believe that's true to some extent in California, for example. But here's the bottom line. It can't be that the state passes a law that ties our hands in terms of social justice. You know, if they pass a law that does not allow for economic fairness, then it's, you know, it's a self-defeating proposition. If they pass a law that does not allow for enough local discretion, it's a self-defeating proposition. So could there be things where, you know, New York City has a more progressive view than the state legislature? Absolutely. But the legislation must be inherently progressive or it will backfire, in my view. Who hasn't gone yet? Yeah, please.
So, Robert Jackson, State Senator-elect. So with respect to that, not only is this being discussed in the Senate, and as we know, the senator here is in charge of the Corrections Committee, and Dave Weapon, who's down there on the left in the Assembly, but you have members of the Black, Puerto Rican, Latino, and Asian caucus is going to make sure that that happens, as far as what the senator talked about, that the issues and concerns that impact especially communities of color that has been negatively impacted, as per what the DA said, the numbers speak for themselves. We're going to be in there fighting to make sure that that flexibility is there in order to make sure that corporate America does not run this business.
Is there anything that the city can do if the state's framework doesn't help?
Well, obviously, if the state says this is what it is, but I don't think that members from the caucus and members of the Senate and Assembly, especially from New York City, they're going to speak up on it. And that's why we're going to have this report as a basis to educate our colleagues in the State Senate and the State Assembly.
Go ahead.
What do you foresee in terms of labeling? Pardon my ignorance. Is there kind of a strength that would be listed? Is there a recommended dosage? What do you want to see with that?
Those are real issues, and I think that's part of having real public education and information that's accessible to people. So any of my colleagues who want to speak from
that's a critical part of what a regulatory framework would look like, how to measure what potency levels are, how to ensure and limit what potency levels are, and how to do labeling. And so this is all part of, what other states have gone through, and we have a lot to learn from them, and would have to be part of any regulatory scheme.
But well, we're certainly recommending clear labeling with maximum information. So part of this is to make sure that the public has information and understands the health impacts, et cetera, and to make sure that those in the business are held accountable for their products, that their products have to be exactly what they say they are. Because again, we are concerned about additives, we're concerned about anything that misrepresents the product. This is classic law enforcement and consumer protection stuff to make sure that the labels are accurate and visible and available. Okay, we're doing media questions. Any other media questions?
What is the planned what is the planned enforcement mechanism for folks who don't pay a fine, whether it's because they're underage and they're smoking in public, they're smoking at all, or if they're in public and they're smoking?
I'm going to start, and Liz can be more expert than I, but the bottom line is whenever you go to summons, and there's been a huge amount of reform, and I think great efforts by our law enforcement colleagues, the city council, et cetera, to move us towards the kind of reality where, for example, we turn to summons wherever possible and appropriate as opposed to arrest. And that does not mean you can ignore the summons. I really want to be clear about this. If you ignore the summons, you ignore it at your own peril. First of all, you end up having to pay more when you eventually pay if you don't pay up front. But if you keep not paying, then you do run the risk of arrest. Would you like to speak to how it works?
You've become a lawyer.
I've become a lawyer. Congratulations, everybody. I saved 3 years of law school right there. So yeah, you can be arrested if you ignore the summons.
After how many? I'm sorry, just after how many times?
So which expert wants to say how long between you get your summons and you ignore your summons and you are in danger of arrest?
So right now with civil summonses, it's after 3.
And that would be the recommendation? citation for marijuana if you fail to pay after 3 times you'd be arrested?
So we haven't set that out in the report.
Using that as an example.
Mayor, in your heart, how tough of a decision was this on marijuana for you? And are you convinced that you're doing the right thing?
I am convinced I'm doing the right thing, and I'm convinced I'm doing the right thing because we took our time. I have not the slightest compunction about the time we took, because the whole discussion kept building to recognize more and more realities that had to be addressed. And I was feeling a lot of frustration over what felt to me to be a very superficial discussion. It was like you're either for or against, and there wasn't a lot of discussion of what it was really going to mean for everyday people and for kids. And some of my view crystallized live on the radio with Charlene when we were being interviewed by the Charlemagne the God. And that's a powerful name right there. And the whole conversation about corporate America came forward and the dangers of the corporatization of this industry. And that really, for me, crystallized one of the things that I had not felt resolved about. And obviously, as I said, the experience of the other jurisdictions really being 100% certain that they had not seen major increase in health and safety problems. In fact, you know, what we got very consistently from them was almost nothing changed. So I'm very comfortable. It required an extraordinarily careful, thoughtful process, and now I am 100% convinced. Okay, anything else on this? Media questions, media questions. Anything else on this report? Okay, we're going to take a brief break. Let me just say to everyone behind us and anyone who's going, I want to wish you very happy holidays, everybody. Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy New Year, Happy Three Kings Day. Hey, Erica. Okay.
It's a good question.
Just give people one more minute to.
Can have it made, that's for sure, which is what that looks like.
Start. Anybody who doesn't want to stick around? Okay. Let me just do a quick statement before we go into other topics, but this is something that's causing real concern this time of year, and I want to address it. I'm going to ask my colleagues in the media, please, to spread this message. This is about public safety, and people need to hear. My message to all New Yorkers is please take special care on our streets this time of year. We have had a situation in recent days where we've lost New Yorkers because of traffic crashes, and we know, tragically, that it's related to the time of year in large measure. This is a time of year when, because of the days being darker, darkness being during the rush hour, the cold weather, people are trying to move along and are bundled up. They can't often see as much as they do in other times of year. It's a dangerous time, and I'm asking all New Yorkers to recognize that. The minute the days get this dark, there's always a danger of more traffic crashes. So pedestrians have to be very aware, but especially drivers. This is a time of year where drivers need to take extra caution. I want to make it very personal for everyone. Every driver holds everyone else's lives in their hands. And when you're driving that car, you have to think about the meaning of what you're doing. And God forbid that you did something that caused a crash. God forbid you were distracted looking at a cell phone or something else, and that caused you to harm another human being. You got to think that that could be your family member, your loved one, that could be the person victimized. So I'm asking everyone to please recognize the particular dangers this time of year, to drive carefully. It's the holiday season. The last thing we want is for any New Yorkers to lose a loved one at this time of year. We know that real change has happened and more will come. We know that Vision Zero has driven down the number of fatalities, and we are going to keep driving them down. But we also know the danger is always there, and it's all of our responsibility. So please help people get that word out so we can have a very safe holiday season. With that, I want to turn to the media for questions on any other topics, that topic or any other topics. If you got anything, go ahead.
So the departure of Alicia Glenn, why, with the Amazon deal certainly not done or ongoing, why now? Why is she leaving?
She is leaving for very personal reasons. It's been 5 very, very intense years. She's served with tremendous distinction. She's gotten a lot done. And this is a conversation that she started with me some months ago, telling me that she felt like the time was coming. And we obviously talked about, the right timing, how to make sure that things got done that needed to get done. I would say the Amazon deal, the basics clearly are there. There's details to work out, but she wasn't the frontline negotiator. James Patchett and his team at EDC have been doing the frontline negotiations, and they will continue to. A lot of the other big pieces that we have been working on, of course, the affordable housing plan, now up at 300,000 apartments, that's working really, really well. She played a crucial role in putting together the NYCHA 2.0 plan. I think she's at a point where she's achieved a whole lot, and she's ready for something different. But she will be here for the next few months to ensure we have a proper transition. Let me see if there's other questions. I know we've had a lot of press activity this week, and we've seen you guys a bunch of times. Go ahead.
What are your thoughts on Mount Sinai acquiring the Rivington House?
I think it's a good outcome, and the kind of thing we would have wished for from day one. And obviously what happened with the Rivington House was a real mistake. It should not have happened. But this is a good outcome in that, health care will be provided for the community. Yes?
Pretty much everyone who's serious about the 2020 presidential election, has made a statement along the lines of, I'm going to talk to my family over the holidays, I'll talk to you in January. I don't think you've made one of those statements. Do you care to comment?
I've been very consistent. My focus is New York City. And I have the honor of doing one of the best jobs in public service in this country. We've got a lot to do and focused on, everything we're going to do in 2019, 2020, and 2021. So that's where I stand. Go ahead.
I think it was Friday, we understand that you spoke briefly with incoming Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. Yes. Just wondering kind of what your relationship is like with her, how many times you've spoken, met, and just kind of where you're at.
Well, including that meeting, it was Charlene who had most of that meeting with her. I was there for, a few minutes, but that's the second time I've seen her in person. We've talked on the phone a few times. I think very highly of her. I feel very aligned with her values, and I think she's a very promising leader who's going to, help achieve a lot of progressive change. So I feel very good about the relationship. Yes?
Mayor, can you talk about the number of children, some 800 or 900, that are still in some of the youth centers in New York State, just across the state, and about efforts trying to reunite them with their families? You've been very vocal about that.
I have been, and this is a stain on our nation that this ever happened, that there even was a family separation policy, and then in the aftermath of that policy, the federal government has not even been able to effectively reunite these families. It's unbelievable, and it's all about the values of the administration in Washington, that they even thought about having a family separation policy and destroying decades of American consensus on asylum. And then on top of that, they were so shockingly disorganized they couldn't even figure out how to reunite families. That continues. We have tried incessantly to get the federal government to come clean and just talk to us about how many kids are in this city and what's being done to reunite them. Cannot get an honest response from Homeland Security, from Health and Human Services. I mean, it's really distressing. And that also breaks the norms of anything I've ever seen in government, where federal agencies at least knew they had to communicate on a basic level with New York City. The only thing that's going to change that situation is an election. See if there's anything else. Yes?
Do you have any update on the situation at the HRA office that I had asked you about yesterday, where there was a scuffle and a HRA police officer was injured? Or anything to speak?
Yeah, the bottom line is a client did something very inappropriate, and as you indicated, was disrespectful to one of the people who worked there, pushed their computer apparently off the desk. HRA peace officer came to intervene. The client attacked the peace officer. That's 100%, all of that is inappropriate, and there's going to be real consequences for that individual for what they did to hardworking HRA employees who do a very good job, to the peace officers who do a very good job and we depend on, and the peace officers affected an arrest, as was appropriate.
About, the peace officers say the NYPD was called and they declined to make an arrest. Are you concerned about perhaps
When you want to know what the NYPD did, respectfully, if you want to know what the NYPD did, ask the NYPD. And my understanding from the NYPD is that the situation was well in control and that the peace officers who have the right to effectuate an arrest were doing so appropriately. And of course the NYPD is going to respect that. Yes?
I'll apologize for being trite, but as we head into the Christmas season, your thoughts and wishes professionally and personally?
Well, I'm really into peace on earth. I'll be trite right back at you. I think it's a time for people to be peaceful. I think it's a time for New Yorkers to, recognize we're a place that has achieved amazing level of harmony in recent years. We're not perfect, but we've achieved more harmony than I think a lot of us ever thought possible. And it's something New Yorkers should be really proud of, that people of different faiths, different backgrounds, really work together, live in peaceful coexistence in this city. So I want us all to, not only have that in the holiday season, but really continue that in 2019. And I think our country needs that good example from its largest city. So I wish people, a very peaceful, wonderful holiday season, a lot of time with their family and friends. That's the other thing. As New Yorkers, if there's one thing we don't have enough of, it's time. And I hope people use the holiday season to do something that's not work and not running around. If you have any ability to to avoid the rat race, to actually have a chance to spend time with your loved ones and chill out a little bit. That's what I wish for everyone this holiday season.
Things that you're thinking about that you want to do better as a person and as a mayor?
Yeah, across the board. I mean, I think of each year as, end of year as a time of renewal. I really do. I spend a lot of time at the end of the year thinking about how I can do better. Very, very proud of my team, very proud of this administration for what we've done, but I know we can do better. I really do. And I want to work on, being the best mayor I can be. I want to find ways to do better than we've done in the past on some issues. It's kind of beautiful that the calendar gives us a moment of renewal. I'm a big baseball fan, and I always say one of the great things you learn from baseball is if you strike out, you get another chance to come up to bat later the same game. Well, I feel like that about human life, too. If you ever do something that you're not satisfied with or you feel like you didn't get far enough, a new year offers a new start. So I look forward to getting a lot more done and reaching higher in 2019. Last call, everyone. All right, very, very happy holidays. We'll see some of you, I hope, appropriately dressed tonight. Yoav might want to go home and change, but the rest of you will be appropriately dressed, I'm sure. Happy holidays, everyone.